Hello everyone, good evening. I hope I'm audible. Yeah, okay. So again, welcome back to my classes, and once again, good evening to all of you. So today we are continuing with the UPSC CSE Modern India Old NCERT textbook. Okay, so today is lecture 9. There will be total 10 lectures in the Modern India series. Today is the ninth one. Okay, and today we are continuing with whatever we have left in the previous class, and today we will be looking into the militant phase of nationalism, that is the extremist phase. Okay, so we have already completed the moderate era of Indian national movement, and today we are seeing the extremist period until the arrival of Mahatma Gandhi, and in the last class, in the final session, we will see the Gandhi era. Okay, so welcome to this session once again. If you have not already subscribed to this channel, please do so, and please share it with your friends so that they can also use it for their preparation. Okay, so lecture 9, chapter 14, the national movement, that is from 1905 to 1918. Okay, so whatever happens in this phase will be taken in this class. So if you have any queries or any questions in between, please feel free to put it in the YouTube live chat section. I will look into it occasionally and I will definitely get back to you. Okay. Good evening, Seema. Good evening, Satya. Okay. So growth of militant nationalism. Okay. So we all know that militant nationalism is also known as extremism. So before we continue, let me just tell you, we are actually going as per the NCERT history old textbook. Okay, so please supplement this with the spectrum textbook for your prelims. Yeah, so both together, both of them will be ample for your modern India uh, history area for your prelims and later on for mains also. Okay, so militant nationalism is also known as extremism, and this phase, okay, had its peak during the partition of Bengal. We will study about all this in detail in today's class, but partition of Bengal in 1905 was one of the most important events that took place around this time. Okay, so what happened is during this international movement, okay, which started in the last half of 19th century, it was built by it was given a proper base by moderates, and eventually it started evolving. The people began to become more and more politically conscious. They began to understand their rights, their what they deserve, and they understand to get a clear picture of the foreign rule and its demerits. Okay, so they began to become conscious of the evils of foreign domination and the need for a fostering patriotism. Okay, so they imparted the necessary political training and the stage was set. Okay, so after the moderate era, the base or the foundation or the stage for the national movement is ready. So before we move on and see what all are the events that happened during this time, we have to see why or what was the necessity of militant nationalism becoming popular. Okay, I mean we saw why an international congress was formed and how the moderates influenced its earlier strategies. So what changed or what made it you know what made this phase shift from moderates to extremists? What were the causes of moderates becoming less popular compared to extremists? Okay, all these things we have to see. So basically, the failure of British governments to accept any of the important demands of the nationalists. This was the underlying cause. Okay, the British government, they promised various things, this, that, etc., etc. But then finally they passed the Act of 1892 that we studied in the last class, and in that act was a complete disappointment, and none of the moderates' demands were, completely given by the British. So all in all, that act was a very highly disappointing act, and other government policies also were continuing, repression, oppression, etc., etc. So all in all, the British governments completely failed to grant any of the important demands of Indian nationalists. The principles and methods of moderate leadership were also not much accepted. Okay, we already talked about this in the previous class. Now they went by prayer, petition, etc., etc. They stuck with constitutional means. They never got the national movement into the masses. They stuck it with the handful of people who were, the upper classes and rich and powerful, influential people. Okay, so in general, the methods implemented by the moderates for this national movement had very less popularity. Similarly, all these facts resulted in a strong demand for more vigorous and political action. Obviously, you know how would that. come. So, moderate nationalists. Okay, we have to remember that despite all these things, it's not like moderates were not, standing up for India or anything. Okay, moderates had their own methods and their own, aspirations and ambitions and all, but that does not mean that they did not stand for India or they were against some sections or anything like that. Problem was moderate nationalists believed that British rule could be reformed from within. They never asked for a replacement of British government by an Indian government because they still believed that rather than changing the British government to an Indian government, okay, rather than replacing the British government by an Indian government, it is possible, or it is even better, to transform the British government towards the Indian needs. Okay, so they thought that that would be more, better for a situation in India. So the nationalist writers and agitators, etc., blamed the British rule because of the poverty of the people. They realized that India could make little progress in the economic field as long as a foreign entity is ruling. We discussed all these points earlier. That's why I'm going through it a bit fast. Similarly, the disastrous famines in the 1890s and the later phases caused a lot of human casualty. Okay, so all in all, the economically, educationally, culturally, as far as the freedom of press is concerned, in all these areas, people began to become frustrated. People also began to become frustrated on the methods that were implemented by the moderates. Okay, so all these are the underlying causes that led to the emergence of militant nationalism. Okay, so passive resistance, or the not demanding enough, or demanding through prayers and protests was not enough. You had to get it to the next step. Okay, so at least a lot of people in India, the majority of the Indians, thought that there was need for this kind of a change in momentum. So some other immediate causes also back this up. These are the long-term causes. This has been happening for a long time. And now, just like any other event in history, everything has some immediate causes. So the rise of militant nationalism was also influenced by certain, things that happened in the 1890s and early phases of 1900s. So in general, the policies that had been taken by the British government between 1892 and 1905 were extremely disappointing. Okay, not at all in accordance with the aspirations of Indians. Best example, Indian Councils Act, a complete disappointment. This is what I told earlier. None of the major demands of the Indian National Congress or the nationalist leaders were accepted in this government, in this Councils Act. And this actually disappointed a lot of people, and this also led to the belief that the shortening of the belief of people in Indian National Congress, the moderate leaders of INC. Another example, in 1898, a particular law was passed, making it an offense to excite feelings of disaffection towards the foreign government. Okay, just think about it. A law which states that it is an offense to excite feelings of disaffection towards a foreign government. So basically, it's like sedition. Okay, you can't. That's a kind of law this is, which in turn prevents certain kinds of publications, the freedom of speech, etc., etc., etc. So government is putting more and more restrictions in the place where the nationalist leaders has asked for less restrictions, asked for more freedom. So whenever the nationalists or the leaders ask for more and more freedom, the government is actually more and more restricting or more and more regulating Indians. In 1899, the number of Indian members in the Calcutta Corporation was reduced. Okay, the leaders are asking for more representation everywhere in the government, but here exactly what it's not even kept at the same state. The number of seats is actually reduced. Okay, the Indian participation is actually being reduced in the government. So nothing is going in accordance with whatever the Indians wanted. In 1904, the Indian Official Secrets Act was passed, which restricting the freedom of press. This was done by Lord Curzon. Okay, during these times, in the early 1900s, Lord Curzon became the Governor General of India. He was a very reactionary Governor General. Plenty of acts were passed during his time, which was completely opposed by a huge sections of Indian society. And some of the important acts are the Indian Official Secret Act, Indian Universities Act, etc. etc. So according to this Official Secrets Act, there were plenty of restrictions that were placed on the press. So freedom of speech or freedom of press is being denied. Nathu brothers, okay, who were prominent figures at that time, they were deported in 1897 without even being tried. Their charges were also not made public. Okay, so Lokmanya Tilak or Bal Gangadhar Tilak and other newspaper editors were sent into long-term imprisonment because they opposed the activities or they published something that were causing disaffection towards the British government. We already talked about the Epidemic Diseases Act. Okay, in the recent times also it has been in the news. Epidemic Diseases Acts which were passed in 1890s. This, according to this act also, plenty of cases were taken. And Bal Gangadhar Tilak was one of the important nationalists who was arrested based on this act for criticizing how the British handled the bubonic plague that was spreading in Bombay Presidency at that time. Okay, so completely reactionary and oppressive policies by the British government repeatedly in the 1890s and earlier part of 1900s. The anti-Congress attitude of Lord Curzon. Okay, that point has several sub-points that we will see later. Officials were becoming suspicious of higher education. This is another interesting thing. In the early part of 19th century, Britishers did want at least a small fraction of Indians to get educated. I mean, they did not want to support mass education, but they wanted a handful of Indians, the wealthy and influential Indians or the upper class Indians to get educated. But now there is a change in attitude. Once the Indians started to use the Western education to criticize the Westerners, British changed their policy and they actually tried to interfere with the education and even tried to discourage higher education. And for that purpose, Indian Universities Act of 1904 was passed. Okay, according to this particular act, Britishers had more and Britishers placed more regulations in the working of Indian universities, and they tried to manipulate or they tried to interfere in the autonomy of many of the Indian universities. So the nationalists saw that this is a direct threat to the education because now the government can decide what the university can impart in the field of education. Okay, so the government is interfering even in the Indian education system. Why? Simple reason, because they wanted to cut down the pace of this nationalist movement. The Britishers understood that this cannot be left unchecked. Something has to be done. Okay, so they try to interfere in every possible field of Indian society. Okay, so all these led to the rise of a new class within the Congress or within the national movement, and this is known as the extremist phase or the militant nationalism. All right. Any questions? Okay, nothing so far. So I'm continuing. So the growth of self-respect and self-confidence. This is something that we see in the early 1900s. Okay, by the end of 19th century, Indian nationalists began to grow in that self-respect and self-confidence. Okay, until now they accepted, they had no choice but to accept a foreign ruler. They were continuing their usual life. They never questioned the earlier scriptures or anything. They accepted it for whatever it is. They were religiously orthodox, socially and culturally also orthodox, stagnated, traditional. But all that changed once education started to percolate in the society. Okay, so once the Indians start to understand about the glorious past, about their own predecessors, okay, etc., etc., they began to have that self-respect. Until now, the Britishers had spread an idea regarding the white man's superiority, the racial superiority of the white man. Okay, the white man's destiny to rule. and the Indians were considered as uncivilized and supposed to be ruled by the Westerners. This was the theory that was prevalent at that time. But education helped the Indians understand that this is not true. Indian people had a great and glorious past, and they can take inspiration from this past, and they deserve to rule. They have the capability to rule themselves. Leaders like Tilak, Bipin Chandra Pal, etc. preached this message of self-respect. They asked the nationalists to rely on the character and capacities of Indian people. Indians has that capacity. Don't look upon a foreign power or a foreign personality, but rather you have it within you. So take that confidence. Okay, so these kinds of leaders like Tilak, Bipin Chandra Pal, etc., start to inspire people along these lines. Other social reformers like Swami Vivekananda, we talked about him in the previous class. Swami Vivekananda also asked the people to look into the glorious past of India and take inspiration from these pasts. So all these things built up the self-respect and self-confidence of Indian people. So they start to believe in their self-effort, which all eventually led to the arisal of political consciousness among the masses. So the nationalist leaders felt that political activity should be carried on continuously and not merely on a few days of the national movement, of the National Congress meetings. Okay, this was another change. During those periods, most of this national movement thing happened during whenever the INC met in its annual sessions or in its provincial meetings. Other than that, there was no continuity in this national movement. Okay, so when International Congress met for its sessions, yeah, plenty of decisions were taken, plenty of memorandums were prepared, etc. But other than that, there was no continuity. Okay, there was nothing, driving the national movement as such. So this strategy has to be changed. The national movement has to be a continuous thing. Okay, you have to keep it alive and not just take it out occasionally during annual meetings or provincial sessions. Okay, so this change in strategy was very much important. Growth of education and unemployment. This is another important point. By the close of 19th century, plenty of people in India start to get education. Okay, I mean plenty of people, please don't take it like, huge percentage of Indian population became literate. No, it never happened. Okay, but compared to the early 19th century and all, a bit more number of people got education. Okay, so when people get education, obviously they will look for a job. We all do that, right? I mean, we are studying all these things because we are aiming for certain jobs, right? So when the number of educated Indians increased, they wanted to have jobs. Okay, they wanted to have a better quality of life, and they also understood what their rights are, what they deserve, what their freedoms involve. Okay, so many of them began to get attracted by radical nationalist politics. Okay, they understood that Britishers are denying all these things to us. They are not giving us proper jobs. They are not allowing us promotions. They are not allowing us good positions in the government. They are not even allowing us to properly represent ourselves in the legislative councils and all. Okay, so unemployment and education also made the Indians move towards a more radical step. The larger number of educated Indians, the larger was the area of influence of Western ideas like democracy, nationalism, radicalism. Okay, so the more people began to get educated in these lines, more and more number of people began to understand their rights, etc. So to along with all these things that has been happening within India, certain international events also persuaded or inspired the Indian people to go into militant nationalism, to make that phase shift. The most important events around those times globally was number one, the rise of modern Japan in 1868. Okay, the rise of modern Japan in 1868. This happened a bit earlier in comparatively, but still, Japan was an Asian nation. Okay, so comparatively not industrialized or anything. A very Asian nation, just like any other India or China or whatever. Okay, but since 1868, Japan began to industrialize radically, very quickly, and it became a very competent and industrialized nations which can compete with Europe. But I mean, Japan is a very industrialized nation even today. Okay, just think about it. After the Second World War in 1945, two atomic bombs were put in Japan, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan was completely destroyed after the Second World War. But from there, Japan is now one of the most industrialized countries in the world. Okay, so the pace of the growth of Japan or the pace of modernization in Japan is very high. Same thing happened on those times also. Japan began to modernize at a very quick rate. So this actually inspired other Asian nations. Okay, if an Asian country, a small Asian country, can industrialize in this level, then why can't we do it? Okay, another one, defeat of Italian army by the Ethiopians. Ethiopia, not a European country. Italy, a European country. So a non-European country defeating a mighty European power. Okay, so this actually shatters the white man's superiority. Clear? There was a theory of invincibility of Europe. Okay, Europeans cannot be defeated by any other power. This was shattered during these times. Number one, the Ethiopians defeated the Italian army in 1896. Then in 1905, the Russo-Japanese War happened. In the Russo-Japanese War, Japan defeated Russia. Okay, just think about it. Russia is the biggest imperialist regime at that time in Europe, largest country, imperialist country in Europe. And this mighty power was actually defeated by a small country of Asia. You know how much big is Russia, right? And you know how small Japan is. And Japan defeated Russia. A non-European or an Asian power defeating a European might. So this completely shattered the notion of invincibility of European powers. Revolutionary movements in Ireland, Russia, Egypt, Turkey. So while we talk about Indian national movement, don't just focus on India, okay? We have to see the world picture, the global picture. Just like the movement was happening in India, in plenty of other areas also, similar movements were happening. Because Europeans were literally colonizing the entire world. Okay, every European power was in a race to colonize some part of the world. Okay, and actually this race for colonialism led to the world wars eventually. Okay, one of the reasons for the world wars was the fight for colonialism. Okay, when new industrialized nations emerged in Europe, they too wanted colonies, but Britain and France pretty much had, their power everywhere in the world. So new states like Germany, Italy, etc. also wanted a share of colonies themselves, and this started to create tensions and wars, and eventually led to the World War. Okay, so plenty of revolutionary movements were happening all across the world, and all these convinced the Indians that a united people willing to make sacrifices could challenge even the mightiest of powers, mightiest of despotic governments. In South Africa, everywhere in African continent, in Latin American countries, in other Asian nations, these kinds of wars were continually happening, and when people are united against such power, it showed results. And these results were inspiration for other nations to take up a similar method of action. Existence of militant nationalist school of thought. Okay, so now we have seen what are the basic causes that led to the rise of militant nationalism. We saw what are the factors that influenced it, okay, on an Indian level as well as in a global level. Now we have to see, since when did this militant nationalism, or since when did this school of thought come into being? Was it, was it something that appeared all of a sudden in the early part of 20th century, or was it there even, or was it there for a very long time? Okay, so any questions? One second. Okay, I think not. So I'm continuing. Okay, so from almost the beginning of the national movement, this school of thought existed. Okay, although initially it was the moderates who were prominent in the Indian National Congress or in the Indian national movement, Still, this school of thought existed of militancy. And the initial leaders were people like Rajnarayan Bose, Ashwini Kumar Dutt, etc. in Bengal. Similarly, Vishnu Shastri Chiplungar in Maharashtra. Okay, these were the earlier leaders. But the man who changed the face of this movement, or the man who is the backbone of militant nationalism or extremist phase of Indian national movement, is none other than Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Lokmanya Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Okay, he is the person who actually brought this movement to the next level. He helped to found the new English school, which later became the Fergusson College. He actually edited the papers, founded and edited the papers such as Maratha in English and Kesari in Marathi. Very important, don't confuse another prelims question. Maratha, the publication Maratha was in English, okay, not in Marathi. And the publication Kesari was in Marathi. Don't confuse it, it's not the other way around. Okay. In 1893, Tilak started using the traditional religious festivals such as the Ganapati festival, etc., to promote nationalist ideas. In 1895, he started the Shivaji festival. Okay, so he started to take inspiration from the past, from mythologies, from taking certain religious aspects also to inculcate nationalistic spirits and to take the national movement forward. Okay, we will study that these aspects were actually having some negative effects also in the society. Then it's not just Tilak, there are other people also such as Bipin Chandrapal, Aravind Ghosh, Lala Lajpat Roy, etc. All these people, all these nationalist militant extremists, okay, they believed that Indians themselves must work out their own salvation and make the effort to rise from their degraded position. Okay, don't look at the foreigners. Don't expect them to guide us or take us towards freedom or liberty or anything. You have to do it yourself. Okay, believe in yourself and you have to work out your own salvation. This is something contrary to what the moderates believe. Moderates tried, already I told you, moderates did not want to replace the British government by an Indian government. They wanted to change the foreign government to adapt to the Indian methods. But militant nationalists were not like that. They believed that Indians had the capacity to rule themselves. They should take it and they should have the confidence to do that, and they should make self-effort, have that self-confidence, etc. to make it happen. Okay, so they denied that India could progress under a benevolent guidance and control of English. So they declared a clear-cut manner that independence was the goal of Indian nationalism. This is very important. Maybe not complete independence or anything, but at least the concept of independence had never occurred in Indian history until that point of time. Okay, until now we never talk about independence from British rule. We talk about wanting to have more representation on legislative councils, wanting to have a fair method of civil service examination and all these things, etc. But we never talked about independence, completely replacing the foreign government by an Indian government. But during the extremist phase, this is one of the ideologies that was put forth by these extremist leaders. That is, independence was the goal of national movement. They had deep faith and strength in the strength of the masses, and they planned to achieve Swaraj through mass action. Okay, so this is the setup. Okay, this is the stage where everything is happening, and we already saw certain things that the militant nationalists did and the British, or what the British did during these times. But something has to happen in a huge scale to bring all this into a national level. So to bring all this into a huge popular event, and that thing or that particular event was the partition of Bengal. So the conditions for emergence of militant nationalism had developed to such a great extent. Indians are educated, they know about their rights, they started to look to the Britishers as foreigners and wanted to have independence. Okay, they started to believe in themselves, they had that self-respect, self-confidence, self-ready to take that self-effort. So the conditions were set. Okay, now it's time for action. And by 1905 or in 1905, something happened, or the partition of Bengal actually happened. which gave that opportunity for all these conditions to come together and play the role. Okay, so on 20th July 1905, Lord Curzon, who was the Governor General of India at that time, he issued an order dividing the province of Bengal into two parts: Eastern Bengal and Assam and Western Bengal, or the rest of Bengal. So the province of Bengal was actually at that time very large. Okay, it contained certain parts of today's Orissa, Bihar, etc. Bangladesh was also part of India at that time. So the province of Bengal was pretty big. So the Britishers said that we are going to divide the province of Bengal for administrative convenience. Okay, this is a huge territory, and it is really hard to rule a huge territory as one big thing. So we are going to fragment it. We are going to divide it into two territories for administrative convenience. This was the narration of British, or reason given by the British for partition of Bengal. Okay, but Indian people, the nationalists, the Indian National Congress, they understood that this is not being done for administrative convenience, but this is being done to create a check to the rising Indian national movement. Okay, why? Because if this was being done for administrative convenience, they could have divided Bengal in certain other ways. Maybe the Oriya speaking community can be divided into a separate territory, and the Bihar people can be separated into a different territory. Okay, that could have been another logical division. But instead of doing any of those, they have split, or they have bifurcated Bengal in such a way that one area has a Hindu majority and the other area has a Muslim majority. The Eastern Bengal had Islamic majority, while the rest of Bengal had Hindu majority. So Indian nationalists understood that Britishers are simply doing what they usually do, that is, divide and rule. Divide the Indians and rule. Okay, so Indians understood what is happening, so they all came together against this partition. Zamindars, merchants, lawyers, students, poor people in the city, even women, all these sections of the society came together in opposition to the partition of Bengal province. Very important. Okay, don't just simply read this and go away. You have to see all the sections. Okay, Zamindars did participate in partition of Bengal, opposed the partition of Bengal. Merchants were there, students were there, women were there. Okay, so if a statement comes like the partition of Bengal had all sections of the society except women, then that is wrong. Women also participated well in the anti-partition struggle. Okay, so all these sections of Indian society actively opposed the partition of Bengal. They understood that this is a deliberate attempt to divide the Bengalis and to disrupt and weaken the nationalism that has been developing in Bengal. Okay, so now we see that this step taken by the British government is met with a huge opposition. Okay, and this gives the platform for development of militant nationalism, or this gives the platform for expression of militant nationalism. Clear? I mean, whenever an oppressive action is taken, there will obviously be a reaction, and that reaction sets the pace for the continuation of that particular movement. Okay, and here the partition of Bengal gave the Indians the opportunity to take the national movement into the next level. Okay, any questions? Okay, I think not. I couldn't find anything, so I'm moving on. So the anti-partition movement, or the Swadeshi and boycott movement. Okay, so initially during the early phase of this particular anti-partition movement, the prominent leaders were actually moderates. It's not the extremists yet. It is actually the moderates who actually led the anti-partition movement in the early phase. And the moderates included at this time Surendranath Banerjee, Krishna, Kumar, Mitra, etc. Prominent leaders at that time. Okay, and during this movement, more or less, moderates and militant nationalists actually cooperated with one another. Okay, they came together against the partition. So did a lot of these other sections of Indian society. Okay, they initiate on 7th of August 1905. they initiated a mass demonstration against the partition in the Calcutta town hall. Okay, but anyhow, although all of them tried to oppose it, partition did take place and it took effect on 16th of October 1905. Okay, when the partition was announced itself, plenty of people started to oppose it. Demonstrations were held, protests were held, but British government, continued with it, and finally the partition was taken effect on October 16th of 1905. And this day was a very peculiar day in Indian history because Indians came together, especially in Bengal, and this is happening in Bengal. Okay, rest of India is still to have the repercussions. So on the day of partition, the day was observed as a day of fasting. Hartal was observed. People walked barefooted and they took bath on river Ganga in early morning. Rabindranath Tagore composed a national song for the occasion. Cries of Vande Mataram was echoing throughout Calcutta. Okay, the ceremony of Raksha Bandhan was observed on that particular day. Okay, the people start to tie the Rakhis on each other's hands to show their unity. Similarly, Ananda Mohan Bose laid the foundations of the Federal Hall to mark the indestructibility of Bengal. Okay, so all in all, a huge display of unity was shown by Indians during the Swadeshi movement, during the anti-partition movement. Okay, but this was not enough. I mean, taking bath in Ganga or walking barefooted or observing a hartal, this is not enough. This is passive action. Okay, you have to kick it up. You have to bring it to the next level. Okay, these are moderate methods. We need to start using the militant nationalist methods or the extremist methods. So more positive action was required that would, reveal the intensity of popular feelings. Simply observing a hartal doesn't actually bring in what the people are feeling, right? You have to display that feeling through certain more expressive and positive actions. And this resulted in the Swadeshi and boycott movements. Okay, so the anti-partition movement was accompanied by the Swadeshi and boycott movement. So in Swadeshi and boycott movement, the reality or what the Indians felt, the intensity of what the Indians felt was brought out or was expressed in this movement. Okay, there was public burning of foreign cloth. Okay, what is Swadeshi? Swadeshi means promoting whatever is in India. Okay, so promoting Indian industries, promoting Indian education, promoting Indian culture, promoting Indian history. Okay, so everything that is Indian is promoted. That is Swadeshi. And boycott. You are boycotting whatever is foreign. And in this case, whatever is British. You are going to boycott British goods. If you remember, the British goods are being dumped into India without any kind of tariff restrictions, while Indian goods are facing huge tariff barriers when it is trying to enter Britain. Okay, so now Indians are creating a barrier to British trade by boycotting British goods. So we will not use British goods. So that itself will cut down British economy. Okay, so this is more action rather than, this is not just passive. This is actually, the next step, taking it into more active phase. Okay, so Swadeshi and boycott movement was initiated as a part of anti-partition struggle. Swadeshi movement had a great deal of encouragement for Indian industries. I already told you. Swadeshi means promoting Indian goods, Indian industries, Indian education, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so plenty of Indian industries were encouraged. Until now, Indian industries were facing huge competition from the machine-made goods that were cheap and of great quality being dumped by Britain. But now, once this movement started, people started to boycott the British goods. So the Indian manufacturers and industries got an ample boost for commercializing and for increasing their profits and getting better. Best example is Acharya P.C. Ray. He organized his famous Bengal chemical Swadeshi stores around this time. Okay, it's not just industries, in other walks of life as well. For example, the nationalist poetry, prose, journalism, all these things started to feel the repercussions of this particular movement. Okay, all these were promoted or enhanced around this time. The national education, for example. Okay, plenty of national schools, means schools and colleges that were set up by Indians were promoted, or new such institutions were founded, and students came out of schools, etc., which were set up by Britain, and started to join schools set up by nationalists. Okay, so nationalist education also began to take an upturn. In 15th August 1906, a National Council of Education was set up. A national college with Aravinda Ghosh as the principal was started in Calcutta. So in every walk of life, the Swadeshi and boycott movement started to have its effects and repercussions. Okay, no questions, so continuing. The role of students, women, Muslims and masses. Okay, so what are the important contributions that were made by these sections of the society? Students in Bengal practiced and propagated Swadeshi and took the lead in organizing picketing of shops, selling foreign clothes, etc. etc. Students were one of the most active participants of this movement. They came out of the schools, they came out of the colleges, etc. etc. and they actively participated in the Swadeshi and boycott movement. They boycotted foreign shops, they boycotted picketed the shops that were selling foreign clothes. They promoted Swadeshi ideas. Okay, and what did the government do? Obviously, government oppressed them. Okay, tried to suppress it very ruthlessly. Students were given, strict punishments. Punitive measures were taken. They were sometimes dismissed from college. They were not allowed to get government jobs. Okay, the colleges which allowed the students to go out and participate in these movements lost its affiliation. Okay, so they were not given grants anymore by the British. Scholarships were, struck down. So Britishers used oppressive and harsh methods to prevent students from actively taking part in the anti-partition movement. Now, women. Okay, there was active participation from women. Throughout history, women were kept in their homes. Okay, very conservative towards women. Patriarchal society. Women never got an opportunity to express their strength. But this was different. The traditionally home-centered women of the urban middle class joined processions and picketing. They came out in large numbers and participated actively in the Swadeshi and boycott movement. Okay, so there was ample women participation. Prominent Muslims, okay, Muslims also joined the Swadeshi movement. Partition of Bengal, I already told you, one part is Hindu majority, other part is Islam majority. So basically, if the partition is to go on as such, then the Muslims will get a Muslim majority area all by themselves. But even then, a lot of Muslims joined the anti-partition movement, joined the Swadeshi and boycott movement. Okay, including Abdul Rasul, the very famous barrister, Liaquat Hussain, the popular agitator, Ghaznavi, the businessman. So prominent Muslim personalities also opposed the partition of Bengal because they understood that Britishers are playing the divide and rule game. They are not doing this for benefit of Muslims or anything. They are simply dividing us to create division in Indian nationalist movement. But at the same time, plenty of Muslims fell for the British trick. Okay, best examples are the Nawab of Dhaka. Okay, Nawab of Dhaka recently received about a huge loan, around 14 lakhs from the government of India. Okay, so Nawab of Dhaka, along with certain other very influential Muslims, they not only, they did not join the Swadeshi and boycott movement, but they also actively supported the British in partition of Bengal. Clear? So the Muslim response to Swadeshi and boycott movement was divided. One section actively supported all these things, supported the Swadeshi, supported boycott, supported the anti-partition struggle, but another section actually supported the British. Clear? The movement did not really affect and involve the peasantry of Bengal. This is one of the biggest drawbacks of Swadeshi and boycott movement. It never really affected the peasantry of Bengal. Remember, this is the biggest section of Indian population. Peasants. India is traditionally an agricultural nation. majority of the Indian population is invested into agriculture, and so the peasants are the biggest majority of Indian population, and this movement failed to reach the peasants. Okay, which means in a sense it failed to reach the masses. The mass support is still not there. Okay, so this is one of the biggest drawbacks. It was confined on the whole to towns and to the upper and lower middle classes of provinces. The lower classes were completely ignored. The rural areas were untouched. Okay, so this was the drawback of, so the main drawback of Swadeshi and boycott movement. Now let's see if it was an all India movement. Okay, the cry for Swadeshi and Swaraj was soon taken up by other provinces in India as well. Okay, certain other parts of India, say Bombay, etc., too had some kind of repercussions. This movement tried to grow into a national movement, but it never really took place. Okay, people like Tilak and other militant nationalists, they tried to take this movement into a national movement. Okay, they wanted this movement to go beyond Bengal and to become a Indian movement, but it did not happen. Okay, it had certain repercussions here and there in various parts of India, but it never really got a national character. All right, let me look at the questions. By moderates for using peaceful methods or hartal or agitation on the grounds because their agitation or formula worked for long term and it managed to sustain for long period. Yeah, I mean, can we justify it? I don't know. I mean, everything that happened in the Indian national movement happened out of necessity. Okay, whatever the moderates did, they did it because that was the condition or circumstance at that time. Just think about it. In 1885, International Congress was born. Okay, until then there was no such national agency which could have brought together everyone. And this national agency was formed by moderate leaders. You can't expect extremist leaders to form such a thing. And even if it was formed by extremist leaders, immediately the Britishers would have taken it down, right? The only reason the British initially went ahead with Indian National Congress is because it was created by a European, Alan Octavian Hume, and it could have acted as a safety valve. That theory is still argumentative, but even then, okay. Similar, their methods worked for a long time. They gave the base or the foundation for the struggle. That is all true. So whatever the moderates did was necessary for the international movement at that time. But once it served its purpose, it had to be replaced by something else. Okay, it cannot continue. You will see that. I mean, we are going to talk about it in the upcoming slides. You will see that moderates eventually lost their stand among the hearts of people. Okay, I mean, they couldn't continue. Their methods were, obsolete after a particular point of time. Okay, so we will look into that in the upcoming slides. At that time, it will become more clear. Growth of militancy. So the leadership of anti-partition movement soon passed to the militant nationalists. Okay, I was just telling you about it. Initially, it was headed by moderates, but later it was taken over by militant nationalists. So what happened? What made that change? What did the moderates lack, and what did the militant nationalists had for their advantage? So many factors were responsible for this. Okay, the early movement protests led by the moderates failed to yield results. We have already seen this. Okay, none of the moderates' demands were accepted by the British. Okay, the government of India, the Councils Act was a complete failure. Repeated demands of the moderates were struck down. Not only it were struck down, in certain cases, Britishers put in further restrictions. Okay, the governments of the two Bengals that were formed after the partition, especially the Eastern Bengal government, was extremely, putting its effort into dividing Hindus and Muslims, trying to create that division. The policies of government were extremely repressive. The anti-partition movement was met with heavy oppressive methods by Britain. In December 1908, 9 Bengal leaders, including the Venerable Krishna Kumar Mitra and Ashwini Kumar Dutt, were deported. Okay, in 1907, Lala Lajpat Roy and Ajit Singh had been deported following riots in the canal colonies of Punjab. In 1908, Bal Gangadhar Tilak was arrested and given a sentence of 6 years. Okay, so huge repressive measures taken by British after the partition of Bengal. Chidambaram Pillai in Madras and Harisarvottam Rao in Andhra Pradesh, all these people were put behind bars. Okay, so overall, Britishers were simply continuing their oppressive methods. So militant nationalists used the Swadeshi and anti-partition agitation to arouse the people politically and gave them the slogan of independence from foreign rule. I already explained this point. Okay, so the idea of independence has been put forth by militant nationalists. The question of partition of Bengal started to become a secondary one. Okay, this is an anti-partition movement that has been taking place because of partition of Bengal. But very soon, the partition of Bengal became a secondary question compared to independence. Swaraj became the primary aspect, primary goal of all these things. India's freedom became very much central to Indian politics around this time. The militant nationalists also gave the call for self-sacrifice, without which no great achievement can be made. And this call was responded by Indians very much enthusiastically. Okay, so this is why the extremists came into power. Okay, this is why the extremists start to have that kind of influence. They gave the Indians what they were aspiring. Okay, they were frustrated with moderate methods, and they now were given a different path, an alternative path, which seemed to be very much attractive. So they took it. Okay, this happens everywhere. Even today in the world, this happens. When people are fed up with a particular government, in the next elections, they will vote for some other government, right? So when somebody else show you an alternative, if it is attractive and if you are frustrated with the existing conditions, you will definitely go for the other alternative. That is what happened here. Moderates were disappointing at this time, and extremists gave that hope or gave that alternate path. But even the extremists failed. Okay, they too couldn't take the national movement in the necessary pace, or couldn't give that all India character, or couldn't get that mass base which the national movement should have had. Okay, so the militant nationalists also failed in giving a positive lead to the people. They aroused the people but did not know how to harness or utilize this new energy. Okay, so they gave this self-confidence, self-respect, okay, all these things. People were, very much having that self-pride and all. But, okay, so they have got the attention of the Indian masses. How will you utilize this? This direction was lacking among the extremists. Though they were radical in their nationalist beliefs, they remained constitutionalists in practice. Okay, they came up with these radical ideas, militant nationalist ideas, extremist ideas, but in practice, they still remained constitutionalists. They did not agitate or in a method that they should have. Okay, during the anti-partition movements or during the Swadeshi and boycott movement, they burned the clothes or they picketed the shops, but that is the limit to which they went. Okay, that's all. I mean, that's the maximum to extent to which they took their active measures. They failed to reach the real masses of the country, the peasants. I already told this. Even the Swadeshi and boycott movement was very much confined within the cities and within the urban sections. It failed to reach the rural areas. It failed to reach the peasants. Okay, just when I say urban sections, think about India in the early part of 19th century. Don't think about today's India. Okay, today a huge part of India is urbanized. During those times, urbanization was very much less compared to what it is today. Majority of India was still rural. And these rural sections remained untouched from whatever is happening. So they failed to harness that potential of India. The government succeeded to a large extent in suppressing these leaders. That is another important aspect. British government was not sitting idle. Whenever these kinds of activities took place or were initiated by nationalist leaders, Britishers opposed it. They strictly brought it down one way or another. Okay, so strong action by British. Similarly, arrests of important leaders like Tilak. Okay, if you have somebody to lead something, then that movement will have, a pace, or it will have life of its own. But when there is no leader to lead this movement, then everything will be a mess, right? I mean, there is a very popular quote saying that if you want to kill a snake, cut off its head, right? So it means, what does that mean? It means that the leader is very much important for a moment. So Britishers were very clever and they took away all these leaders. They arrested all the important leaders. They arrested visionaries like Tilak, etc., etc. So once they were gone, there was a blank. There was nobody to lead them. There was nobody to direct them into a path which they should take. Similarly, some other veteran leaders like Aravinda Ghosh, Bipin Chandrapal, they etc. retired from active politics. I mean, they were very senior leaders, and at some point of time they had to retire from politics, and they did this at this time. So overall, there was nobody to take the momentum forward at this time of Indian history. The anti-partition agitation, in fact, marked a great revolutionary leap forward in the Indian nationalism. But despite all these things, despite its failure, despite the failure of extremist movements or the momentum of international movement at this time, still the anti-partition agitation was actually a great leap, revolutionary leap in Indian nationalism for all its merits. Okay, there were plenty of demerits, but it had a lot of merits that cannot be ignored. Okay, but now we saw about moderate phase, we saw about extremist phase. So what is the people going to do now? Okay, they so moderate some tried something, they failed. The people got frustrated with them. Extremists also tried something, and the people were very much into it. They all supported it, but now there is a blankness. Okay, there is nobody to lead the movement to the next level. What is to be done? Nobody knows. Okay, so total confusion. At this time, something new comes up in Indian national movement, and that this particular phase is known as revolutionary terrorism. We had moderates, we had extremists, and now we have revolutionary terrorism. This is something that is born out of the inspiration from extremist activities. Okay, so the government repression and frustration caused by the failure of political struggle ultimately led to revolutionary terrorism. Okay, this is the frustration. Government is ruthlessly oppressing everyone and nothing is happening for India. So all this frustration, etc., etc., made certain youth, Indian youth, to take up terrorist activities, revolutionary terrorist activities. And this led to the growth of revolutionary terrorism. It is simply out of desperation. Okay, it is simply out of nothing else. If earlier movements showed positive results, and if it had a path figured out, then revolutionary terrorism may not have happened in India. May not sure, but there was. I mean, if it was going all well, then what is the need for these kinds of activities? Okay, but since the earlier activities did not yield much result, out of desperation, the youth of India fell back upon the cult of bomb. The cult of bomb. Okay, that is revolutionary terrorism. They no longer believed that passive resistance could achieve nationalist aims. So the revolutionary young men, what did they do? Did they try to generate a mass movement or did they try to influence the masses? No. This is something completely different from what was happening until this time. Okay, it is nothing like the moderate era or the extremist phase. Revolutionary terrorism is a very much isolated thing. I mean, in the methods in which it worked, it did not had a mass base, but what it had is isolated individual efforts. Okay, they decided to copy the methods of Irish terrorists, the Russian nihilists, etc., to assassinate unpopular officials. This is not mass action, this is terrorism. So isolated events here and there, particular targets, particular victims, etc., etc. For example, in 1897, the Chapekar brothers assassinated two unpopular British officials in Pune. 1904, Vinayak Damodar Savarkar organized the Abhinava Bharat, a secret society of revolutionaries. Sandhya and Yugantar in Bengal and Kal in Maharashtra. These were publications of these revolutionary terrorists. Okay, all these are prelims points. So when I share the PDF, do read them and by heart them. Okay, I will share the PDF of these particular slides in the Telegram channel, the link of which is given underneath. You can go through that. You can join that channel. Okay, In April 1908, Khudiram Bose and Prafulla Chakki, they threw a bomb at a carriage in which they believed was Kingsford, the unpopular judge of Muzaffarpur. Okay, Muzaffarpur, a province in territory in India, and the judge at that particular area was Kingsford. Okay, and he was extremely unpopular, very much pro-European and very much anti-Indian. And Prafulla Chakki and Khudiram Bose, they together threw a bomb at his carriage. And for this action, Prafulla Chakki had to shoot himself to escape the British, and Khudiram Bose was caught, he was tried, and he was executed. He was hanged to death. Okay, lots of secret societies of terrorist youth came to forward, were born. Anushilan Samiti is one of the most important ones that came around to life at that time. Another event that happened was the throwing of bomb at Viceroy Lord Hardinge. Okay, when Lord Hardinge came to India, there was a grand procession of his entry into India, and these revolutionary terrorists threw bomb at Lord Hardinge. It did not, I mean, they were not trying to kill him. Okay, they were not trying to kill Hardinge. They just wanted to make a point. Okay, the bomb was not like did not have the potential to kill anyone or anything, but they wanted to make a point. They can even throw a bomb at the highest power of British in India, the Viceroy. Okay, that was a statement that these revolutionary terrorists were trying to make. It's not just in India. Revolutionary terrorism had global repercussions. Okay, not just in India. In London, for example, Shyamji Krishna was a very much important personality who came into this particular stream. P.D. Savakar, Shyamji Krishna and Hardayar. Similarly, in Europe, other parts of Europe, Madam Bigaji Kama and Ajit Singh were the prominent leaders. Okay, but this particular method of struggle or the revolutionary terrorism also petered out. It also did not work. I mean, it will never work. We all know that. Okay, terrorism is not an answer for anything. Okay, whatever your concerns are, even if it is genuine, terrorism is not the way to go for it, to achieve it. So obviously it failed. Okay, but it did make a valuable contribution to the growth of nationalism in India. Okay, people began to get inspired from these young revolutionaries. Okay, I mean, later on, these kinds of activities were done by Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, Rajguru, and all these people. We know about this, about them. Okay, they are inspirations for us. So these revolutionary terrorists, although they failed in their objective, still managed to inspire Indians into the national movement. This is one of their biggest contributions. Bhagat Singh is even now a huge hero for Indians now. So that was their most important contribution towards Indian national movement. They became immensely popular among their compatriots, even though most of the politically conscious people did not agree with their political approach. That's true. Okay, veteran leaders, very much, people who are very politically conscious, the Indian intelligentsia. Okay, these people never accepted their methods. I mean, they were backing their ideology. I mean, in the sense that, they are all trying for the same cause. But the methods in which they tried to achieve it was not accepted by the other prominent sections of Indian society. I mean, even now, we too can't accept that, right? It's, I mean, throwing bombs and all is not the way to deal with any problem. Okay, so while all these things are going on, what was the Indian National Congress doing? The most important agency, the only agency that is having this national character around this time, the Indian National Congress. What has this agency been doing all these times? Okay, so from 1905 to 1914, what was INC's role in Indian national movement? That is what we are going to see. Okay, let me see if there are any questions. Had their personal purpose for fighting the war, can we say the Swadeshi movement was the period for nationalism? Was the period for nationalism thought? Yes, comparatively to a larger extent, yes. But remember, Satya, remember that Swadeshi and boycott movement was more or less constricted or contained in Bengal. Okay, it never got an all India appeal. These kinds of ideologies were put forth in that time. So nationalism did definitely rise during this moment, no question, absolutely correct. But even then, it is still confined within the areas of Bengal. Extremist leaders wanted to make this movement spread into other parts of the country as well, but the moderates opposed it. They wanted to contain this in Bengal itself. So this was another blunder committed by moderates, but anyway, that is what happened. Okay, so in general, we can say nationalism did come into a huge extent during these moments, but still it did not have an all India appeal. Okay, it never had repercussions in the intensity it was required in other parts of the country. Minor repercussions were there. So, the agitation against the partition. All sections of the International Congress united in opposing the partition. Obviously, I mean, they knew what was happening. They knew that Britishers were simply playing the divide and rule card, and they opposed it. All sections came together in this. The National Congress also supported the Swadeshi and boycott movement in Bengal. Okay, they also supported Swadeshi and boycott. Much public debate and disagreement between moderates and militant nationalists came into forth around this time. This is what I just told. While the extremist leaders wanted to extend this anti-partition struggle and the Swadeshi and boycott to larger parts of India, moderates did not want this to happen. They wanted to contain this within Bengal, and they wanted to continue their constitutional peaceful methods in other parts of the country. Okay, this was the moderate stance at this time. So here we see that the moderate leaders and the extremist leaders have a difference of opinion, and this difference of opinion starts to continues to develop, and very soon we will see that this results in a split within the National Congress, already popularly known as the Surat split. So anyway, there was a tussle between the two groups for the presidency of International Congress. Okay, in 1905, there was a tussle between the moderate sections of INC and extremist sections of INC to capture the presidentship, highest position in INC, International Congress. Okay, so finally, Dadabhai Naoroji was made the president as a compromise. Dadabhai Naoroji at this time was a very prominent leader accepted by all sections of Congress or all sections of society. Okay, he had that kind of influence. He was both extremists and moderates respected him. Both of them were, as a compromise, both of them together made him the president of International Congress. Okay, during his speeches, Dadabhai Naoroji openly declared that the goal of Indian national movement was self-government or Swaraj, like that of United Kingdom or its colonies. Very important. This is the first time the word Swaraj is appearing in Indian history. Okay, not Purna Swaraj. Don't confuse it. Purna Swaraj come in 1929 Lahore session under presidency of Jawaharlal Nehru. But Swaraj comes up for the first time during the presidency of Dadabhai Naoroji in 1905. Okay, that is independence. So in his presidential address, Dadabhai Naoroji openly declares that the goal of India is to achieve Swaraj. But this Swaraj is not complete independence. This Swaraj is like the Swaraj or the kind of independence that was having in United Kingdom or its colonies. So within the British, within the suzerainty of British, a kind of self-autonomy. That is the kind of Swaraj that is being put forth here, not complete independence. Okay, many of the moderate leaders, many of the moderate nationalists did not keep pace with the events. Okay, so as this movement is going on, it is getting more and more into the extremists kind of movement. Okay, the moderate methods of the prayer, protest, etc. is simply not materializing anymore. So a lot of moderate leaders couldn't keep pace with what is happening. Okay, the militant nationalists were not willing to be held back either. So both of them, again, there is a tussle. Okay, they couldn't compromise on anything. Moderates wanted to go back to what their initial methods of struggle. Extremists did not want to do that. They wanted to continue whatever is being happening in the Indian national movement. Finally, a split came between the two sections of the International Congress at the Surat session in 1907, and this is known as the Surat split. The Surat split happens in Indian National Congress. Okay, so the Congress is now split into two factions. Okay, the moderate faction and extremist faction. So basically, the extremists walked out. The crux of the Congress is now the power is given back to the moderates. Problem was that the moderate leaders lost touch with the younger generation of nationalists. The younger generation is inspired by the extremist methods of action, right? I mean, youth of India is always, we have that blood boiling and all. We go by emotions rather than logic or anything. So we need that kind of pace, that kind of energy in action is very much required. We won't wait for with petitions and prayers or anything. No, we want action. I mean, even now it is the same thing, right? Youth of India always will go for action rather than peaceful, prayers and protests and all these things. So what did the British do? Britishers tried to take advantage of this split. They wanted to, make sure that these kinds of divisions will remain so for a long time. So to placate the moderate nationalists, Britishers announced the constitutional concessions through Indian Councils Act of 1909, popularly known as Morley-Minto Reforms of 1909. Okay, Morley was the Secretary of State of India and Minto was the Governor General. Okay, so the Morley-Minto reforms were announced by the British to placate moderates. To give them, this is the carrot and stick policy. Okay, this is known as carrot and stick. Okay, so this is basically the carrot. Okay, the Minto-Morley reforms or the Morley-Minto reforms is basically the carrot. They are trying to give certain concessions to the moderate leaders so that they will be happy with it and they will withhold from the international movement. So the extremist leaders were, comparatively smaller sections and it will be easy to beat them down. That was the idea. Okay. Later on in 1911, the government also announced the cancellation of the partition of Bengal, another important step. This was actually a kind of blunder did by British government. Why? Because partition of Bengal was very much favorable to certain sections of Muslims. When in 1911 this partition was cancelled, the Muslims understood that the partition was not done for their benefit, but it was a political game of Britain. Okay, so this gave out the cats out of the bag now. Okay, so the Western and Eastern Bengals were to be reunited, while a new province consisting of Bihar and Orissa was to be created. Sorry. Okay, and the seat of government was shifted from Calcutta to Delhi. Let's see what the Morley-Minto reforms is. The exact points you have to study, that is given in your Lakshmikant textbook and in the Spectrum textbook. Take it and read the individual points and by heart those points. Okay, Morley-Minto reforms are very important constitutional reform in India. Please do look into it. Each and every point is important. I am sticking with the points given in NCERT old textbook. Okay, so any questions? Okay, nothing. So continuing. Morley-Minto reforms. Others can also ask questions. Okay. So far only Satya is asking any questions. Other viewers are also feel free to ask questions. If I know the answer, I will immediately tell it. Otherwise, I will check it out and give the answer in the next session. Anyway, Morley-Minto reforms. The Morley-Minto reforms increased the number of elected members in Imperial Legislative Council and the provincial councils. So these were the kinds of demands the moderates wanted, no? More representation of Indians in Indian Legislative Council. These were the kinds of demands the moderates always asked for. So Britishers gave some concessions in those fields. More representation in Imperial Legislative Council. Most of the elected members were elected indirectly. That is important. Okay. Although more representation were given, it does not mean that it is democratic agency or anything. Elections were conducted, yes, but it was indirect elections. Some of these elected seats were reserved for landlords and British capitalists in India. Okay, I mean, still Britishers are doing their job. I mean, they will support whoever supports them. So they are very much trying to put landlords and their favorite persons into the legislative council. The reformed councils still enjoyed no real power. Okay, they were merely an advisory body. They did not had any real power of such at all. Okay, plenty of, I mean, they could uh, advise the government on certain things, but the government is not bound to take any action upon it. Okay, basically a powerless body. The governor can cut down any of its activities anytime he wanted. So basically, you know a toothless tiger. So the real purpose of the reforms of 1909 was to confuse the moderate nationalists and to divide the nationalist ranks. I think that is very clear. So the system of separate electorates was another very important aspect of this particular act. Okay, separate electorates for Muslims. This is one of the biggest steps taken by the British in communal lines. Okay, so what does this separate electorate means? Separate electorate means only the Muslims will vote and only a Muslim person will come out as the winner. Only Muslims can compete in that electorate, and the voters are also Muslims. So basically, they are trying to bring in religion into politics. Huge blunder. I mean, advantages for British, of course, but as far as Indian history is concerned, one of the most devastating things that ever happened. Okay, eventually all this leads to partition, the other partition, India-Pakistan partition. Okay, so this actually checked the progress of India's unification, which had been continuous historical process. This particular act, the Morley-Minto reforms, by bringing in this separate electorates, started to instigate or started to trigger and support communalism in India, and this resulted in the destruction of the national unity that was happening as in the forms of a composite culture for a very long time, and it led to the growth of communalism. Moderate nationalists did not fully support parliamentary reforms. Okay, they were moderates, and I mean Britishers were trying to placate them, but still moderates too did not accept, or I mean they were not happy about parliamentary reforms as such. But they decided to cooperate with the government in the working of this reform. This is the attitude of moderates. Okay, they did not like it, so they should have protested, or they should have taken to rebellion or whatever, mass protests or something like that. But instead of that, even now the moderates try to work in cooperation with British. This is a political blunder because you can't sell this to the masses. Maybe they had some logical reasons for doing this, but can you sell this to the masses? No, no politician can ever sell this kind of a strategy to the masses, even if that strategy may have something good in it. Okay, so these kinds of actions taken by the moderates completely alienated the moderates from Indian public, especially Indian youth. They lost the respect of Indians. Okay, so the moderates started to wane in Indian politics and the extremists started to come up. Extremists took the central stage. The modern political consciousness was late in development. So this is another topic actually. So this is the end of the moderate era, or let's say the moderate era ended comparatively earlier, and by these reforms, okay, by around 1910, 11 at that time, in entirety the moderates were completely isolated from Indian masses. Okay, they lost all kinds of respect and support they had received in the initial stages from the Indian masses. Okay, so another organization that came up around this time is the Muslim League, All India Muslim League. Okay, so Indian National Congress was one prominent agency that was making all the activities around this time. But I already told you plenty of communal activities has been happening in the sidelines, and all this resulted or at least some of this contributed to the formation of All India Muslim League, which is a political body but of religious character. Okay, so modern political consciousness was late in developing among Muslims. Already I had told you this in the previous class. Okay, political consciousness did not arise among the Muslims in a quicker phase, or at least not in simultaneously with Hindus. It was lagging behind a lot. Why? Because Muslims, I know they at those times educationally they were backward compared to Hindus. Most of them were traditional, aristocratic and all. They never liked, or they never accepted the Western philosophies, or they never tried to imbibe the Western thoughts and education and ideas and all. For all these reasons, they remained, or they lagged behind in education and in other such fields. Hindus and Muslims fought shoulder to shoulder in the revolt of 1857, but after the repression of this revolt, British officials had taken a particularly vindictive attitude towards Muslims. This also I explained yesterday. Most of the important, influential zamindars, landlords, etc., were Hindus, and they sided with the British in this revolt. Since the Muslims, did not side with the British, or since most of the Muslims actively participated in the revolt of 1857, Britishers started to take a hostile attitude towards Islam, the Muslims of India. But after 1870s, this attitude changed. I told you this also yesterday. Okay, there was a change in attitude completely, and they started to actively play the divide and rule policy. So they tried to, make one faction fight the other faction. They tried to put the Hindus against the Muslims and Muslims against the Hindus. So to check the growth of united national feeling in the country, they decided to follow more actively the policy of divide and rule. So they decided to win over the Muslim aristocrats, the zamindars, landlords, and newly educated people, etc. They promoted provincialism by taking off Bengali domination. Tried to utilize the caste structure to turn non-Brahmins against Brahmins. So in whichever way you can divide India or divide Indians, they tried to make it happen. The divide and rule policy tried to divide Brahmins and non-Brahmins, tried to divide Hindus and Muslims, tried to divide wealthy, powerful sections from poorer sections, and support provincialism. What is provincialism? A kind of regionalism. Okay, set one region against another region. This is what is provincialism, or the play of regionalism. They actively encouraged movements to replace Urdu as a court language by Hindi. So all this has important, repercussions or important consequences. Okay, consider even today's India. There has been huge debates regarding Hindi becoming a national language. Most of the South Indian states oppose it. Not just South Indian states, the northeastern states also oppose it. Okay, so changing a language or replacing one language with another or adding a new language, all these kinds of things has political repercussions in the country. So Britishers at those times, right now Indian government tried to, placate all these sections and try to, maintain peace in the country. But during those times, what did British do? They tried to encourage more and more regionalism. They tried to encourage all these, distrust among the people and divide the people. Okay, so Syed Ahmad Khan was one important figure who contributed to this at that time. Earlier in his career, Syed Ahmad Khan was a very much religiously tolerant person and all. I explained him yesterday. But later on, he changed his attitude and he began to work with the British. He began to work with the orthodox sections of Islam. He preached complete obedience to the British rule. He opposed International Congress. He tried to organize with Raja Shiva Prasad of Varanasi a movement of loyalty towards the British rule. Okay, why? I already explained in the previous class, so I'm not going to explain it again. Okay, so how could the communal and separatist trend of thinking grow among the Muslims? Okay, they know what is happening. Every Indian at this time knew that Britishers are playing the divide and rule, but still the communal elements grew in Indian history. Okay, so how could this communalist and separate elements in Indian history grow among the Muslims? In Hindus also it happened. We will come to it. But first, among Muslims, how did it grow? Relative backwardness of Muslim education and trade and industry. This is the primary reason. Okay, relatively backward education. So easy to manipulate. Okay, it is very much, if a person is illiterate or if a person is educationally backward, it is very easy to brainwash that person and it is very easy to sell anything to that person. Okay, education is very important in that sense. So traditional backwardness of Muslims at those times in education, in trade, in industry, etc., etc., was an important factor that contributed to this. Upper class of Muslims during the first 70 years of 19th century were very anti-British, conservative and hostile towards modern education. The number of educated Muslims in the country remained very small. All these were factors that led to the backwardness, educational backwardness, industrial backwardness, backwardness in trade. Okay, so they remained traditional and backward. At this time, certain prominent personalities who gained Western education tried to try to inculcate more and more education within the Islam and tried to bring up the social status and attitude of Muslims. People like Syed Ahmad Khan, Nawab Abdul Latif, Baharuddin Tayyabji are all examples of such personalities. The small number of educated persons and men of trade and industry among the Muslims enabled the reactionary big landlords to maintain their influence all over the masses. Okay, there were only a handful of Muslims who were actually educated and who were actually forward thinking. Majority of the influential people at that time were still aristocrats, still landlords, zamindars and all, etc. And these people were pro-British, or say these people were pro-traditionalism. Okay, so they had the major influence in the society. The masses were still influenced by them, not the intelligentsia. This also kept the Muslims out of education. Okay, Muslims had also lagged behind the non-Muslims in respect of governmental positions. Why? Obviously because they are not educated enough at that time, at that point of history. Okay, I mean, if you want to get a good sorry for that. There was some internet issues. I hope it is fixed. Okay. So anyway, the manner in which Indian history was taught in the schools at that time also did not, you know, was in communal lines. Okay, at least at some parts of India. Okay. So yesterday I have explained this, glorifying India's ancient past. The certain Hindu historians try to do that. Certain Islamic historians tried to glorify the Middle Eastern culture where Islam was born. Okay, so all these things also led to some kind of communal, methods of teaching around those times. Communal historians asserted that there existed distinct Hindu and Muslim cultures in India. This is also wrong. Hindus and Muslims has been coexisting in India for a very long time, and Indian history we have a composite culture. Okay, but certain historians, the communal historians, try to put forth that Hindus are different from Muslims and Muslims are different from Hindus, and these two cannot coexist. Even now, certain elements try to make it so, but this is wrong. Okay, we are all as much Indians as we can be. Okay, so in his presidential address, the National Congress of in the National Congress of 1886, Dadabhai Naoroji gave the clear assurance that Congress would take up only national questions and would not deal with religious and social matters. This is the kind of attitude that was necessary at that time. Okay, Dadabhai Naoroji, the very famous personality who is also the second president of INC. First president W.C. Banerjee, second is Dadabhai Naoroji. He, in his presidential address, said that Indian National Congress will not take up any questions that has to do with religion and social matters. It is a political body and it will take up national questions. In 1889, the Congress adopted the principle that it would not take up any proposal which was considered harmful to the Muslims by a majority of the Muslim delegates to the Congress. Okay, so if the majority of the Muslim delegates of the Congress think that something is harmful for the Muslim community, then the Indian National Congress will not continue with that plan. Okay, this was openly declared by Congress. So Congress is actually trying to bring in that unity in India, while British is actively striving hard to create that division. Okay, so the militant nationalism was a step back in the growth of national unity. This is actually an unfortunate point. Okay, I mean, national unity was very much cultivated by the moderate leaders. But when the militant nationalists came, this this continuous process of integration of India, okay, this continuous process, progress of unity among Indians took a backseat. So what happened was people like Tilak propagated the Shivaji festival, Ganapati festival, etc., etc. All these had Hindu tinges. Similarly, Aravinda Ghosh had this semi-mystical concept of India as mother, Bharat Mata, India as a mother, and nationalism as a religion. The revolutionary terrorists took oaths before goddess Kali, Hindu goddess. And the initiation of this anti-partition agitation with the dips in Ganga. I told you, the anti-partition agitation was started by early morning baths in river Ganga and all. All these are, Hindu methods or associated with Hinduism, had tinges of Hinduism. This is not something that is accepted in Islam. I mean, bathing in Ganges, Ganapati festival, Shivaji festival, nothing of this actually accommodated Islam. So the activities of militant nationalists in general had this kind of Hindu tinge, and this contributed, at least unknowingly, or maybe directly or indirectly, to the growth of communalism. Okay, in certain instances, to declare Akbar or Aurangzeb as a foreigner and to declare Pratap or Shivaji as a national hero was very much projected in the Indian history as in a communal outlook. Just think about it. Okay, Akbar or Aurangzeb, how can you say that that personality is a foreigner? Both of them were born in India. They were brought up in India. They were as much Indians as anybody else. India was their home. Okay, for Akbar or Aurangzeb, India was their home. They were Indians. I mean, Aurangzeb did a lot of fanatical things during his time, but still he was an Indian, irrespective of everything else. Okay, even today, in today's world, there are people who are Indians who do a lot of bad things. Okay, that doesn't make them foreigner. Okay, so you can't brand Akbar or Aurangzeb as a foreigner and say Pratap or Shivaji is a national hero. All of them deserves to be equally treated in Indian history. But unfortunately, militant nationalist historians actually glorified Shivaji and Pratap while actually trying to paint Akbar and Aurangzeb as foreigners and not Indians. So this does not mean that militant nationalists were anti-Muslim. Okay, that is very much important. Once again, let me check the live chat. I hope it is still loading. I will get back to it. Okay, so this method, these kinds of activities does not mean that militant nationalists were anti-Muslim. Okay, or even only communal. That was not the idea. Most of the militant nationalists, including Bal Gangadhar Tilak, favored Hindu-Muslim unity. Okay, they may have used these methods, but they were not trying to build communalism in India. Even the revolutionary terrorists who were really, all these doing all these terrorist activities, etc., etc., they actually took inspiration from Ireland, Russia, etc., etc., rather than from Kali or Bhavani cults or anything like that. They may have given the oaths before Kali and all, but they took the inspiration from Ireland, the revolutions in Ireland, Russia, Italy, etc., etc. So although the methods had Hindu colors, it does not mean that they were trying to create communalism. But there was some certain Hindu tinge. Large number of educated Muslims either remained aloof from the rising nationalist movement or became hostile towards it. Okay, and this all cultivated a separatist outlook. Economic backwardness of the country also contributed a lot to the rise of communalism. Why? Competition for jobs. There were only limited, unemployment was very prevalent, plenty of educated people are there. Okay, and there were only low number of jobs available. And, this was both Hindus and Muslims and all other religions, everybody wanted to get these jobs. So there was a race for these kinds of jobs on the basis of religion. Okay, this led to spread of communalism or growth of communalism to a large extent. Finally, in 1906, the All India Muslim League was founded under the leadership of Aga Khan, Nawab of Dhaka, and Nawab Mohsinul Mulk. These three people together founded the AIML or the All India Muslim League. This supported the partition of Bengal and demanded special safeguards for Muslims in the government sectors. This is the other faction of Muslims that we talked about earlier. One section of Muslims supported the anti-partition struggles, while another section supported the British, and this is that section that supported the British. Okay, later on we see that separate electorates were given by the Morley Minto reforms. Muslim League's political activities were directed not against the foreign rulers but against Hindus and National Congress, and they played into the hands of British. Rather than staying united, they actually played into the hands of the British by trying to attack Hindus and National Congress rather than siding with them and attacking British. The basic weakness of the League came to be increasingly recognized by patriotic Muslims. Okay, even then, there were certain sections of the Muslims who did not join the League. They knew what was going on. So the real patriotic Muslims, they understood the basic weakness of the League. Okay, so another important movement that happened around this time is the Ahrar movement. Okay, before talking about this, let me just check the questions. ANC could have done something to win over the faith of Muslims at the time, as it was equally important for national movement and to represent unity even after the separation. Exactly, Satya. Very good observation. You are indeed correct. International Congress could have and should have done certain things to appease the Muslims or to bring in the Muslims into the national movement and stay united. But lack of action was very much evident at that point of history. And this continues. Okay, lack of action from both sections, from Hindus as well as Muslims, or say Muslim League as well as National Congress. This continues for a very long time. And it is only in the late 1930s that Congress tried to actively bring back the Muslims into, or the Muslim, these other separatist factions into Congress. Okay, by then it is too late. We will study about that, don't worry. We will look into that in detail. But your observation is perfect. Indian National Congress should have done certain things to prevent all this from happening. But unfortunately, passive action or lack of action facilitated all these things. Ahrar movement. The militantly nationalist Ahrar movement was founded at this time under the leadership of Maulana Muhammad Ali, Hakim Ashmal Khan, Hassan Imam, Maulana Zafar Ali Khan, and Mazarul Haq. Okay, so these people founded the Ahrar movement. So what is this Ahrar movement? Basically, they disliked the loyalist politics of Aligarh school. Syed Ahmad Khan's policies in the Aligarh school, they did not like it. I mean, why should you be loyal to British? Okay, Britishers are clearly not doing anything good for India, so why continue with the loyalist policy? So Ahrar movement started as an opposition to the Aligarh school's ideas. So they were moved by modern ideas of self-government, and they advocated to achieve active participation in the militant nationalist movement. They supported the militant nationalist movement. Similar nationalist sentiments were arising among certain sections of traditional Muslim scholars in the Deoband school as well. Another prominent Islamic school, the Deoband school, they too were starting to have anti-loyalist ideologies. Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad, one of the prominent personalities here, propagated his rationalist and nationalist ideas in his newspaper Al-Hilal, which he was brought out in 1912. He was very young at that time, around 24 years of age, and he brought out this Al-Hilal newspaper where he propagated his rationalistic and nationalist ideas. Okay, so basically Ahrar movement is kind of a anti-Aligarh school movement. I mean, against the ideologies of Aligarh school. Okay, so there are only a few more slides. Don't worry, we will wind this up by 7 p.m. Okay, so the world stage. Don't be worry about this huge passage. You can simply read through it. That's all. Nothing much. It is just that in 1911, a war broke out between the Ottoman Empire and Italy, and during 1912 and 1913, Turkey had to fight with the Balkan powers. Okay, the Turkish ruler claimed at this time to be the caliph or the religious head of all Muslims. Moreover, nearly all of the Muslim holy places were situated within Turkish Empire. So basically, Turkey is very much important for Islam. The caliph is there, who claims to be the religious head of Muslims. Most of the important places of worship of Islam, holy places of Islam, are in Turkey. Okay, and Turkey had to fight countries like Italy, etc., the European countries. So a wave of sympathy towards Turkey swept in India. There are a huge lots of Muslims in India. So when an Islamic nation or such a prominent nation for Islam is being attacked by these European powers, there was strong sympathy towards that nation, towards Turkey, and that happened in India also. So a medical mission headed by Dr. M.A. Ansari was sent to help Turkey. Since Britain's policy during Balkan Wars and after was not sympathetic towards Turkey, the pro-Turkey and pro-Caliphate Khilafat sentiments tended to become anti-imperialist. So this sympathy towards Turkey eventually became anti-European or anti-British, and because British is a imperialistic power, it became anti-imperialist in general. Okay, so a religious cause is actually creating an anti-imperialistic opinion or anti-imperialistic movement. This is Khilafat. Okay, but anyway, most of the militant nationalists among Muslim young men also did not fully accept the modern secular approach to politics. Okay, there were still plenty of traditional orthodox factions. They did not like the modernistic ideas or Western thoughts or anything. The result was that the most important issue they took up was not political independence, but protection of holy places and Turkish Empire. This is the irony here. Okay, rather than taking up political questions for personal freedom, liberty, rights, etc., they took up religious causes to formulate that mass event or mass protests or whatever. Okay, so the heroes and myths and cultural traditions they appealed to belong to the West Asian history, not Indian history. So West Asia, birth of Islam, etc., everything is there. The prominent holy places are there. Turkey, the Caliph, etc., is there. So they try to take up the cause of West Asian history and myths and all, rather than taking up political causes. So this led to communalism in Islam, among Muslims. In Hindus also the same thing happened. But there was no organized Hindu communalists formed at this time. Okay, there was no party of Hindu communalists at this time. Parties like Hindu Mahasabha comes up eventually later. Okay, at this moment in 1906 we have All India Muslim League. We do not have a corresponding Hindu communalistic or communalist agency at this time. But that does not mean Hindu communal ideas are not there. It is plenty much in the Indian society at this time. Okay, there was a lot of talk on Hindu nationalism. They declared that Muslims were foreigners in India, and this created separatist tendencies. Okay, so eventually communalism grew in both sides, among Hindus as well as among Islam. Okay, I can't see any chat. Is it stuck or are you not posting anything? For some reason, let me just refresh it. 1 second, guys. There are only a few more slides. It won't take long. 10 more minutes maximum. 1 second. Okay, I have reloaded it. Still no chat, so I think it's fine. Anyway, the nationalists and the First World War. Okay, so here is something else that goes or that contributes to the second phase shift in Indian national movement. Okay, we are about to enter the Gandhian era. So what are the events that leads to the Gandhian era? We will study that later in tomorrow's session in detail. But today, let me just talk to you about certain very important things that happened in India before the arrival of Mahatma Gandhi. So on June 1914, we all know the World War started. The First World War broke out. Britain, France, Italy, Russia, Japan, US, etc. on one side, and Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Turkey on the other side. Why did this war take place? For the struggle for colonies. I already explained this point at the beginning of this session. Okay, everybody was in a race to achieve new colonies, and Europeans, the newly industrialized European nations such as Germany, Austria, Hungary, etc. wanted a share in these colonies. British and France, the traditional colonialists, did not want to share their territories. So naturally a war happened, and this resulted in First World War. So the nationalist leaders, including Lokmanya Tilak, they decided to support the war effort of government. Okay, they actually decided to support Britain. They mistook or they mistakenly believed that by being grateful to Britain, the Britain would repay India's loyalty with gratitude at the end of the war. Okay, if you help Britain now, at the end of the war, Britain will show its gratitude towards Indians. This was a mistaken belief. We all know that nothing happened. Okay, so this was another blunder committed by nationalist leaders in general at that time. And problem was, at the end of the World War, Britain tried to achieve more and more colonies rather than giving away its own or allowing self-determination or independence to its own colonies. So the Home Rule leaks comes around this time. So what are these Home Rule leaks? Many Indian leaders saw clearly that government was not likely to give any real concession unless popular pressure was being brought. Something had to be done. There is no popular event happening. After the Swadeshi and boycott movement, nothing of that sort happened in Indian history for a considerable period of time. So it is now necessary to have some kind of action. Okay, you need to put that popular pressure on the government to achieve your goals. And this led to the formation of the Home Rule leaks. The World War destroyed the myth of racial superiority of Western nations over Asian people. We all know that. Western nations quarreled among themselves and they exposed each other's demerits. Okay, Britain and France exposed Germany's wrongdoings in its colonies. Similarly, Germany, Turkey, etc. exposed Britain's and France's wrongdoing in its own colonies. So mutually they quarreled each other and they exposed each other. Okay, so they ruined themselves. The First World War showed the real color of these countries to the world. Okay, the war led to increased misery among poor classes of the Indians. Yes, the war is a very costly affair. The poor Indians felt the brunt of it and they had to suffer a lot. And at this time, two Home Rule leagues were started in 1915-16 period. One is under Lokmanya Tilak, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, other under Annie Besant and Subramanya Iyer. Okay, and both of it demanded for grant of home rule or self-government to India after the war. At the end of the war, we want home rule or self-determination or self-government. Okay, growth of the revolutionary movement also continued around this period. I mean, individual terrorist attacks happened here and there during the war period as well. The Indian revolutionaries in the United States of America and Canada established the Ghadar party around this time in 1913. Ghadar means rebellion. Okay, so the Ghadar party was established in 1913. While most of the members of this party were Sikh peasants and soldiers, their leaders were mostly educated Hindus and Muslims. So all sections were there. Okay, so these kinds of revolutionary organizations were born in other parts of the world as well to contribute to the Indian freedom struggle. On 21st February 1915, the Ghadar party fixed this particular date for an armed revolt in Punjab. Okay, World War is going on. So, I mean, it is going to start very soon. Our countries are engaged in mutual wars. So, we are going to take advantage of that situation. Okay, that is what the Ghadar party thought. And they fixed 21st February 1915 for an all India revolt starting in Punjab. Unfortunately, their plan was leaked and Britishers found out about all these things and it was collapsed. I mean, the plan collapsed. Many of the people, who were caught were executed, tried, etc., deported, sent into imprisonment, etc., etc. And after their release, they founded the Kirti and communist movements in Punjab. After the release of these prisoners who were caught as a part of the Ghadar movement, they led to the establishment of the Kirti and communist movements in Punjab. Some of the important Ghadar leaders were actually, Baba Gurmukh Singh, Kartar Singh Saraba, Sohan Singh Bakhna, etc., etc. Okay, just remember all these names. If you are asked to match the leader with the corresponding party or movement or anything, you can. It will help you. So, inspired by this Ghadar party, 700 men of the 5th Light Infantry in Singapore revolted under the leadership of Jamadar Chisti Khan and Subedar Dunde Khan. Okay, so all around the world, wherever Indians are there, they all started to take up the cause of India and they started to use their own methods to achieve their goal. Another example, in 1915, Jatin Mukherjee, popularly known as Bhaga Jatin, he gave up his life fighting a battle with the police in Belaso. Okay, so revolutionary activities were still very much continuing. And at this time, during this ongoing First World War, another very important thing happened in Indian national movement, and that is the Lucknow section of Indian National Congress in 1916. Nationalists around this time understood that the disunity among their ranks is actually hurting India. Okay, militant nationalists and moderates split for a reason. The Muslims went to Muslim League, and Indian National Congress continued its path for a different reason. They all understood that this is not helping India; it is only ruining India. So it is time to find a solution. So in Lucknow in 1916, two important things happened. One is the two wings of Congress were reunited. Okay, and the second is that All India Muslim League and the Indian National Congress together placed certain demands in front of British. They came together to place demands in front of British. These are the two important things that happened in Lucknow session of Indian National Congress. Coming back of moderates and extremists together into the Congress, that is accepting back leaders like Lokmanya Tilak, etc. into the ranks of Congress. And second one, Congress and Muslim League unitedly presenting their demands in front of the British. Okay, so the two organizations passed the same in the respective sessions. They put forward the joint scheme for political reforms, but the problem was they still kept the separate electorates. Okay, they never tried to cancel this idea of separate electorates. Even the Congress accepted this. Why? Because they saw an opportunity to work shoulder to shoulder with a Muslim League, and they thought that accepting certain demands of Muslim League might actually help it. But this was another blunder. You should not have accepted separate electorates. Okay, but anyway, that was accepted, and the demand for that the British government make a declaration that it would confer self-government to India after the war was also put forth. So these joint petitions were put forth. Okay, so we are reaching the last slide for today's session. This is the last slide. Okay, but unfortunately, problem was this unity, although it happened, it was based on the notion of Hindus and Muslims as separate entities without secularization of the political outlook. This is what I just told. They should not have accepted separate electorates. Okay, so they tried to become politically united, while at the same time they were religiously very much different. Okay, they presented a united front politically, but at the same time they had that religious distinctiveness or separatism within them, and this led to communalism or resurgence of communalism in Indian history. The immediate effect of the developments at Lucknow was tremendous unity between the moderate nationalist militants and the National Congress and Muslim League. I already explained this point. Around this time, during the war period, due to the revolutionary activities and the activities of these nationalist people, Defense of India Act and other similar regulations were passed by Britain. Defense of India Act is basically taking away all your rights, arresting people for no reason, putting them into trial, placing them in prison. Very strict, harsh measures taken by British government. That is the Defense of India Act, which was passed around this period. But due to the popular pressure, and because the British was fighting a war elsewhere, which is more important to them at this point of time, on 20th of August 1917, Britishers announced something. That is, the gradual development of self-governing institutions with a view to the progressive realization of responsible government of India as an integral part of the British Empire. Okay, this is the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms. This is the pretext for Montagu-Chelmsford reforms. Edwin Montagu and Lord Chelmsford, they came together and they actually announced this. The British announced this particular statement. So what does this statement mean? This statement means that Britishers have finally accepted the idea of responsible self-government for Indians. So from now onwards, if the people of India asks for self-governance or asks for a responsible self-government, it cannot be considered as a sedition, or it cannot be considered as a disaffection towards the government. Why? Because the government itself has made it clear that it is the government's opinion or view or vision to bring in responsible self-government for India. Okay, so this was a huge step in Indian national movement. The Britishers accepting this. They accepted this only because the First World War was going on and they couldn't fight the Indians at this point of time. That is the only reason they brought in this. Okay, but anyway, this actually became the base for what happened in the coming years. In July 1918, the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms were announced, and in 1919, the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms came into being. The Government of India Act of 1919 came into being. Some concessions were allowed, but separatism still continued. Communal lines still continue. Okay, but that we will look in the next class, probably day after tomorrow. Okay, but anyway, this led to a phase shift in Indian politics. And around this time, in 1915, Mahatma Gandhi came back to India from South Africa, and he wandered around India for 1 year, studying Indian politics and studying what India really wants. And we will speak about the Champaran Satyagraha, Kheda Satyagraha, Ahmedabad mill strike, etc. tomorrow. But from this point onwards, we see the second phase shift of Indian national movement, the end of the extremist phase and the beginning of the Gandhian era, or the final phase of Indian national movement, at the end of which India will gain her independence. But at the same time, gets divided into two nations in communal lines. Okay, so at this juncture, I think we will stop here. Okay, the Gandhian era is something that I will take in the next class. Thank you all for patiently waiting. I know that today's class went a bit out of time, but thank you for patiently joining me in this class. Please make sure to like and subscribe to this channel. Like this video also. Please share this with your friends so that I can get more views and more rating in YouTube. Thank you all for joining. I will share the PDF of this PPT very soon in the Telegram channel. The link is given here. It is also given beneath in the YouTube description section. Okay, so that's it. Thank you all. Bye bye.